Well, we saved the best for the last, so thank you for sticking around. So Nordy, it's great to have you as our keynote interview as we wrap up the day and reflect on the day. Just a couple of words about Nordy. He's already had an esteemed career as a diplomat. And you know, I wish I had his airline miles because he's one of the most, I think, traveled persons, maybe one of the most jet-lagged persons I know. He just came back from Dubai. He's extraordinarily active on social media. I was just looking at social media a couple minutes ago and you popped up on my feed. So very, very busy. He's really the gold standard, and I mean that literally. In 2011, he received a gold standard for public communications. And perhaps the most interesting thing about him is that when he was in high school, he spent a year in Diamond, Missouri. So he's gold and diamonds, but he lived on a farm. And so you should ask him about that at the reception. Anyway, so let's get down to it and wrap up the day with some questions to you. But I want to give you 5 minutes or so just to share your impressions of the day and any thoughts you have before I ask you some questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, David. I'm kind of standing between this session and cocktail reception, which you are all waiting for. So there is a saying in Japanese that speechは短く人生は長く. So the speech should be short, but life should be long, right? So I will try to kind of shorten my speech and just touch upon some of salient points from today's conversation.
Great.
As was introduced, I have been working for Prime Minister Kishida during the last over 2 years, and I have always accompanied Prime Minister Kishida to overseas trips. So when I look back this year's diplomatic events, of course, there was a G7 Hiroshima summit, as was already discussed, and we have been visiting a number of so-called global South countries, including ASEAN countries, India, Middle East, African countries, not to mention the United States and EU and Europe. And so we are reaching out to various friends across the globe. As was mentioned by Minister Nishimura, we have not yet visited Latin American countries, so hopefully next year we will be reaching out. What I wanted to mention at the outset is, as was introduced by Ambassador Emmanuel, the U.S.-Japan alliance is the foundation cornerstone of Japan's security and diplomatic policy. But we are also coming up with a robust trilateral relationship, for example, among Japan, the United States, and Korea, Camp David's spirits. And more recently, Prime Minister Kishida visited Manila, and we are expanding our partnership with many of Southeast Asian countries, including not only economic, trade, and investment relationship, but also coming up with a security collaboration. So this is a pivotal year in terms of Japanese diplomatic history, in my opinion, that we are coming up with more concrete agenda items for cooperation with a free and open Pacific notion. And we are tackling major challenges facing many Asian countries in terms of when we go to mega cities in Asia, such as Delhi, Jakarta, Manila. I can see that the Japanese companies are working on rail projects or creating smart cities. And most recently, when we visited Japan Pavilion of COP28, we have seen more kind of proactive engagement by Japanese companies in terms of providing solutions for green transformation and digital transformation. So this is a very positive development, in my opinion. And in terms of kind of combining this digital transformation and green transformation that Prime Minister Kishida mentioned, if we could connect with other like-minded countries in the Indo-Pacific region, there would be more investment opportunities when we are reaching economic growth, sustainable economic growth, energy security, and toward a net zero society. So I just stop here and willing to welcome your questions.
I think a big theme today has been green transformation. You talked about it, COP28. You've just returned from that event. Tell us a little bit more about that and the emerging role that you see for Japanese business when it comes to that.
I think Japan or Japanese government, in close cooperation with the Japanese private sector, we have been dead serious about kind of achieving numerical targets toward 2030, 2050. And so far during the last 10 years, we have a good track record. Even in comparison to other G7 countries, we have been doing very well in terms of reducing by 20% of our GHG emissions. And of course, we need to do more, and we need to invest more in technologies. And this is deeply related to the forthcoming policy of the government of Japan in terms of issuing national green transformation economic bond or climate transition bond. And this will really give incentives for Japanese companies to invest. We will be closely engaged with the private sector in terms of which areas of industries would lead to further reduction of emissions. So there will be priorities to be placed, but we are mindful of a comprehensive approach. Governor Koike was talking about new, say, net zero houses, factories, offices. We are not only focusing on energy issues, but also we are talking about societal change. So this is something we try to convey to other friends attending COP28. And this is something we would continue to engage with our friends.
So sticking a little bit longer on the green transformation and Prime Minister Kishida's policies, what do you see the impact for the Japanese economy being? What do you see the broader impact for the Indo-Pacific region being?
So the Japanese government is coming up with a sector-basis numerical targets in terms of combining 20 trillion yen of government bond, transition bond, to be accompanied by 130 trillion yen of private investments. And for that to happen, we would need to very closely work with the industry, and this would be a kind of open process. We welcome other like-minded countries investing in Japan as well. And in terms of Indo-Pacific region, there have been lots of discussions about ASEAN or India, and we think that Asia is the area where we can deploy these clean energy solutions to actual situations, especially in megacities. So we believe, that as we promote connectivity between Japan and ASEAN, in collaboration with other like-minded countries, G7 countries, we will be able to contribute to substantial reduction of emissions across Asia and the Indo-Pacific.
So you mentioned ASEAN. There's a big event coming up soon. I think it's the 50th anniversary of Japan-ASEAN relations. And also the Asia Zero Emissions Community Summit. That's going to be held, I think, the next day. Tell us about that.
So now, as Prime Minister Kishida is welcoming the leaders of ASEAN countries, it's going to be the first summit of AZEC, Asia Zero Emission Community Leaders Meeting. And now we are working with individual ASEAN countries in terms of coming up with specific roadmaps for energy transitions. We know that energy security or energy policy landscape are different according to individual countries. And we wish to help all our friends in Asia, focusing on ASEAN, India, and sometimes Bangladesh. For example, we just supported Dhaka Metro after Delhi Metro. So the Japanese companies' technological solutions could really help the ASEAN's energy transition. So this is something we hope to discuss among the leaders. And as was mentioned already, it is very important to have kind of top-down messages on the country's leaders committing themselves to green transition, energy transition.
So the free and open Indo-Pacific, a term that Japan helped to push, and Prime Minister Abe coined it, and then obviously a very, very high priority for Prime Minister Kishida. There's a new plan, as I understand, related to FOIP, and also including the Japan-ASEAN Comprehensive Connectivity Initiative. Tell us more about that.
So Prime Minister Kishida announced the new plan of FOIP in Delhi in March. And one example that he raised was to improve connectivity between Northeast India and Bangladesh. And of course, India is starting to look outward, especially to ASEAN countries. So if we could connect Indian economy and ASEAN economy, that in a sustainable manner, that would be positive for the global economy. So this is something we are trying to tackle. And of course, the demand for investments in Asia are so big that Japan alone will not be able to do it. So there was already discussion about the IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Frameworks, and we are looking forward to U.S. investors, American or European investors coming on board. And this is a joint work. There was a reference to teaming up. And so what we are attentive to is, for example, with rapprochement between Japan and Korea, we are talking about creating new hydrogen supply chain, which was mentioned at Stanford between Prime Minister Kishida and President Yoon. And so if we could connect with Northeast Asia, ASEAN, India, and when we visit the Middle Eastern countries, they are talking about connecting India and the Middle East. And our hope is that there will be peace and prosperity across the Indo-Pacific region, which could cover the Middle Eastern countries or Eastern African countries. We were discussing Indo-Pacific FOIP collaboration with Kenya, Mozambique, when PM Kishida visited. And of course, Prime Minister Abe proposed FOIP in Nairobi, Kenya in 2016. So we have a relatively broad geographical notion of Indo-Pacific, which include, for example, South Pacific island nations, which we are collaborating with Australia or New Zealand as well.
So let's turn briefly to Europe and Ukraine. And Japan has been a big supporter of Ukraine. What's been the role, at least from your viewpoint, of the business community and what they've been doing there?
So as you remember,
Japanese business community, yes.
Prime Minister Kishida visited Bucha and Kyiv in March after India. And there is an interagency in the Japanese government involving not only METI or Ministry of Transport, but also, for example, agriculture and agriculture ministry. And we are very much encouraged to see that the Japanese startup companies are coming on board. For example, Tsubame BHP. They are trying to help Ukrainian energy landscape, making use of ammonia, for example. And so the government will be strongly supporting the Japanese companies, including startup companies, to help alleviate the challenging situation in Ukraine, especially when winter is coming. And the Japanese government will be hosting bilateral reconstruction meeting for Ukraine, most probably in February of next year. So we are strongly committed to supporting recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine, while we continue to implement the stringent sanctions against Russia.
So here's my last question to bring us back to the U.S.-Japan alliance. One of the big outcomes from my viewpoint of APEC was, as I understand, President Biden has invited Prime Minister Kishida to the United States for a state visit. That's a big deal. So what can you tell us about that?
That's right. So the last kind of state visit by the Japanese Prime Minister was during Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's administration, I guess back in 2015 or so. And of course, as I mentioned, deepening Japan-US alliance and broader ties between the two countries is vital. And so when Prime Minister Kishida visits the United States, most likely Washington, D.C. Next year, we are hoping that we would go further in terms of deepening our ties. Yeah.
Great. Well, I think you can see why Nori is the gold standard. So we'll wrap it up here. Thank you, Nori, for being available to speak today and be our wrap-up for the keynote interview. So everyone, please give Nori a hand.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Good.